You are at a closing table and the loan officer slides a sheet across to you. $400,000 house, 80,000 down, which took you 6 years, 320,000 borrowed, and the number at the bottom, the one you pay every month for 30 years says $2,129. Your sister Priya bought the same floor plan 2 streets over in 2021, same price, same down payment, same loan. Her payment is $1,349, $780 a month between you and your own sister for the same house. Nothing about that house changed. What changed was a decimal point on a government web page neither of you has ever looked at. My name is Nick. Today I'm going to show you why the whole planet is drowning in debt, why that decimal point is the most expensive number in your life. And one more thing. By the end of this, you will understand why you, the one paying more, might come out ahead. Let's start with what that gap costs you, because you should know your own number before we go near a trillion of anything. Trillion is where numbers stop being money and start being weather. Like over the life of your loan, Priya pays about $165,000 in interest. You pay about $446,000, $280,000 of difference. Same house, same family, same down payment. You did not overpay. You did not negotiate badly. You are renting money in a year when money got expensive, and she rented it when it was nearly free. She did not out-negotiate you. She out-timed you by 24 months, which is not a skill, and I encourage you to raise that at every available family gathering. And this goes well beyond your kitchen because the same thing happened to every government on earth at the same time. The world owes about $348 trillion. Governments owe roughly $107 trillion of it. Companies owe $100 trillion. Banks owe 76. And households, meaning you and Priya and everyone you have stood behind in a checkout line, owe about 65 trillion. Split that across 8 billion people and it comes to roughly $43,000 each, newborns included, which is a rough way to start a life. Here is what a trillion is. Count $1 a second and a million takes 11 days. A billion takes 31 years. A trillion takes 31,700 years. You would have started before farming was invented. Now do that 348 times. Hold that number loosely though. Serious institutions put the world total anywhere from 250 trillion to 348, depending what they count. When the experts disagree by $100 trillion, you are not looking at a measurement. You are looking at an estimate in a suit. And here's the part nobody puts in a thumbnail. Measured against the world economy, global debt has actually fallen 5 years running. The record total and the shrinking burden are both true at once, which means the thing crushing you is not the size of the pile. So if the pile is not growing faster than we are, why does your life feel like it is closing in? Because the rate on the pile changed. That is the whole video. And you and Priya are living in the two halves of it. To see why that matters, you need to understand something genuinely strange about where your money comes from. And I promise this is not the part where I tell you to buy gold. In 2014, the Bank of England published something remarkable. When a bank makes you a loan, it does not hand you money somebody else deposited. It types a new deposit into your account. Your loan creates the money, and roughly 97% of what you think of as money is not cash at all. It is bank deposits, which is somebody's debt seen from the other side. The honest caveat, because I will not insult you. Banks cannot conjure money infinitely. They are limited by capital rules, by interest rates, and by the problem of finding borrowers who can pay. But the core fact holds. In the economy you live in, your money and your debt are the same substance viewed from opposite ends, which means your $780 a month is going somewhere. Let's find out who is receiving it. His name is Hector. He is 67 and he is the reason your payment exists. He spent 40 years putting money into safe, boring places, and for most of the last decade he was punished for it. His savings account paid 0.4%. On $50,000, that is $200 a year, one nice dinner, and a tip. Every month, his bank mailed him what was functionally a receipt for nothing. Today, Hector's cash earns closer to 5%. Same account, same man, 12 times the income. And you are one of the people paying for it. Sit with that, because your whole life is downstream of it. Every dollar of debt on this planet is somebody else's asset. There is no such thing as debt without a creditor. When your payment leaves your account, it does not vanish into a hole. It moves toward Hector, toward pension funds, toward people you will never meet. The world is not underwater. It is split between those who owe and those who are owed, and the terms between you just got rewritten while you were busy living. So why borrow at all instead of taxing you or printing the money? There are honest reasons. Wars are sudden. Recessions need somebody spending when everyone like you has stopped. But mostly, taxing you is unpopular. Printing robs you through inflation, and borrowing does neither today. It pushes the cost onto a version of you that cannot yet vote, which is how America arrived at roughly $39.5 trillion in federal debt, near 99% of the entire economy, on track to break the record set right after the Second World War. Per American, about $116,000. Different measurement from the $43,000 I gave you earlier. One is federal debt. One is all debt on earth. Anybody quoting both in one breath is not doing math. They are doing theater, but the total was never the problem. Here comes the problem, and it is the same problem you have. Last year, America spent about $970 billion on interest. Just interest. Not roads, not soldiers, not hospitals, not one single thing you can walk into. $970 billion for the privilege of having borrowed in the past. That is the third largest line in the entire federal budget. Only retirement and healthcare cost more. It is bigger than the whole defense budget. It swallows roughly 19% of every dollar the government collects from you, about $7,300 per household per year. That is $2.8 billion a day. In the time you have been watching this, the bill grew by about $35 million. 5 years ago, that number was $345 billion. It has nearly tripled, and the debt did not triple. Here is the mechanism, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Government debt is not a 30-year fixed mortgage like yours. It matures constantly and has to be replaced. Last year, about $9 trillion of it came due. A quarter of the national debt, refinanced in a single year. So picture the government shuffling up to the refinancing window every month, handing over bonds issued at 1.5% and walking away with new ones at 4%. Over and over. It is a man rolling one credit card onto another, except the limit is $9 trillion and the teller is the entire planet. It is your problem exactly, with 8 more zeros and no option to stay in the old house. And I want to stop here because I think you already know what this section actually feels like. It feels like refreshing a rate website every morning the way other people check the weather. It feels like getting the raise you spent 2 years earning and watching every dollar of it vanish into a payment that did not exist when you started the job. It feels like doing refinance math on the back of an envelope for a rate that may never come back, then doing it again the next week anyway. It feels like the words starter home turning into a joke you no longer laugh at. And it feels like sitting across from Priya at Thanksgiving while she says she just bought when she bought, and being unable to explain why that sentence sits in your chest the way it does. 3 weeks before closing, you almost walked away. You had the email drafted to your agent. You did not send it. Hold on to that, because the reason you were right not to send it is not the reason you think. Because here is what I need you to hear. You did not miss a window because you were lazy or slow or bad at this. There was no window. There was a global repricing decided by inflation data, central bank committees, and bond markets on 4 continents. Nobody consulted you. Nobody consulted Priya either. She did not outsmart you. She was standing in a different year. The only difference between you is which price you were handed. You are not behind. You are paying full retail for something your sister got on sale, and the sale was never advertised. Quick pause, because the next part gets strange. I run a school community where we break down how to build income that does not depend on any of this, including how to grow a faceless YouTube channel from zero. Link is below. It costs nothing, and I'm in there answering questions. All right, back to it. Now let's kill the most popular myth you have been told, that America owes all this money to China. Foreigners hold about 24% of it, 24. Three-quarters is owed to American pension funds, American banks, and the retirement trust fund that is supposed to pay you later. And the biggest foreign holder is not China. It is Japan. China holds under 2% of the total, its lowest since 2008, and has been quietly selling for years. So the real answer to who you owe this money to is mostly Hector, people like him, and quite possibly your own retirement account, which means the honest answer to who is doing this to us is partly us. Either deeply reassuring or Thanksgiving with Priya all over again, depending on your family. At this point, you are waiting for me to say the collapse is coming. I am not going to, because one country has been running your nightmare for 30 years and refuses to die. Japan's government debt is around 230% of its economy, higher than anything you have ever been warned about, and it has sat there since the 1990s. Traders predicted its collapse for so long that betting against Japanese bonds earned a nickname. They call it the Widowmaker because it kills the people who try it. So why is Japan fine? Because the debt is owned at home. Its central bank holds something like 46% of every government bond in the country. When your biggest buyer is your own central bank, nobody panics and sells. And because rates stayed near zero, Japan's debt service ran near 1.7% of its economy, against 3 or 4% for America. Japan owed far more and paid far less. Which should tell you everything. The size was never the story. The price was always the story now, the turn. Japan ended negative rates in 2024, and its long bond yields have been climbing since. Your closing table and their bond market are running the same script. And while we are demolishing things, here's the most expensive spreadsheet error in history. In 2010, two famous economists published a paper. Once a country's debt crosses 90% of its economy, they said, growth falls off a cliff. It became gospel. Finance ministers quoted it, austerity budgets leaned on it, which means it reached into real pensions and real hospitals. Then a graduate student asked to see the original spreadsheet because he could not reproduce the result. He got it, and the formula had been dragged across the wrong number of cells, silently dropping 5 countries out of the average. Corrected, the cliff was not there. Growth for high-debt countries came out near 2.2%, not negative. There is still a real link between heavy debt and slower growth, and the authors always called it correlation, not cause, but a decade of policy that reshaped millions of lives leaned on a formula that stopped one row too early. Next time you feel bad about a mistake at work, carry that with you like a small, warm stone. So what happens when this does go wrong? Because sometimes it does. What turns a debt problem into a crisis is losing the market's confidence faster than you can respond. In 2022, Britain announced large unfunded tax cuts, bond yields spiked, pension funds were forced to sell the very bonds that were falling, which pushed yields higher, which forced more selling. The central bank stepped in within 5 days. The prime minister was gone in 7. A bond market disciplined an entire government faster than you can cancel a gym membership. And then there is what it looks like when nobody steps in. In 2022, Sri Lanka defaulted for the first time in its history. 12-hour blackouts, fuel queues stretching for kilometers, hospitals out of medicine. At least 12 people died waiting in those lines, aged 19 to 84. The president fled the country, so when you hear the phrase sovereign debt crisis, stop picturing a chart. Picture an 84-year-old man dying in a queue for cooking gas. All right, you know how big it is, why it got expensive, and what happens when it breaks. The only question left is how it ends, and historically there are 5 ways out. Exit 1 is growth, and this is where the story you were told falls apart. Everybody knows American debt fell from about 106% of the economy after the war to roughly 23% by the 70s and assumes booming growth did it. Researchers reran that period. Growth alone would have brought it to about 73%, not 23. So Growth did half the job you have been giving it credit for, which makes we will grow our way out of this about as reliable a plan as we will fix it in post. So what did the rest? Exit 2, inflation and its quieter cousin, financial repression, which sounds like something you would discuss with a therapist. And honestly, maybe you should. For 35 years after the war, real interest rates were negative about half the time, quietly liquidating 3 to 4% of the burden every year. Nobody voted for it, nobody announced it. Bondholders were paid back in money worth less than they lent, and most never worked out what had happened to them. Exit 3 is austerity, which mostly fails because shrinking the economy shrinks the thing you measure against. Exit 4 is default, unavailable to a country that borrows in its own currency. Exit 5 is letting the central bank absorb it, the better dressed version of Exit 2. So the answer for your country is not really in doubt, not default. Modest growth, persistent inflation, and savers quietly paid less than they should be for a very long time. Which means the bill does get paid, it just gets paid by Hector. And now I can answer the question I opened with and explain that email you never sent. The rate the government pays is the floor underneath the entire cost of money in your life. Your mortgage is priced off it. Your car loan stacks on top, averaging over 7% new. Your credit card, if you carry a balance, it sits above 22%, which is its own separate video and, frankly, its own separate emotional support animal. Every one of those numbers is the government's rate plus a markup for the risk that you, specifically, are not the federal government. So that $970 billion interest bill is not a distant political story. It is the same repricing that put $780 a month between you and your sister. You are not adjacent to this story. You are inside it. But look where that leaves you. You locked a fixed payment into a world whose likely resolution is decades of inflation. Your payment cannot rise. The dollars you use to make it will almost certainly be worth less every year. Priya got the better rate and she is fine, but she is not the one the next 30 years is built to reward. Hector is, and not in a good way, because the historical exit from debt this large runs directly through people holding cash. That is why you were right not to send that email. Not because the house was a bargain, it was not. Because you accidentally ended up on the side of the ledger that inflation forgives. Some perspective though, because doom framing is lazy. American households owe a record $18.8 trillion. But the share of your income going to debt payments is actually below where it stood before the 2008 crash, mostly because so many people locked in cheap mortgages and never let go. The savings rate is the worry, near 2.6% against a pre-pandemic norm closer to 7%. And remember, these are averages, not medians. The typical household looks nothing like the arithmetic. The pain is concentrated, not shared. So here's what I would actually do with all of this. Stop waiting for 3% to come back. It might, but planning your life around the reversal of a global repricing is not a strategy. It is a hope with a spreadsheet attached. Treat today's safe rate as your hurdle instead. If government debt pays you 4 or 5% risk-free, any investment or renovation or business idea has to beat that after tax before it deserves your money. That discipline did not exist for a decade, and it is the one useful thing this mess gave you. And know which side of the ledger you are on, because it decides everything else. If your debt is fixed and your income can grow, time is working for you. If your savings sit in cash, time is working against you. Hector needs to hear that far more than you do. I am not a financial advisor, and none of this is financial advice. It is arithmetic, and arithmetic is not personalized. If you want the community where we work through this together, link is below. One last thing. America has paid off its national debt exactly once in 1835. 2 years later, the country collapsed into one of the worst depressions of that century, partly because killing the debt removed the safe asset the whole system was built on. Turns out the plumbing was load-bearing. The world is not in debt because people got greedy. The world is in debt because debt is the plumbing, and for 15 years, your water was free. It is not free anymore. Nobody sent you a notice. The rate changed and everything built on top of it, including the number on the sheet in front of you, changed with it. You are not bad with money. The price of money moved while you were living your life. So find out what your rate actually is and then make sure that everything you own is earning more than it.